Imagine Independence Day 2025.
Yeah.
Fireworks lighting up the night sky, a big celebration of freedom. But something else really momentous just happened. It was signed into law that very day. And it seems poised to fundamentally reshape the fabric of America. We're diving deep today into what's been controversially dubbed the One Big Beautiful Bill.
It's certainly a striking name, isn't it? And signing it on July 4th, well, that itself holds immense symbolic weight.
Definitely.
Our mission today is to really unpack this monumental piece of legislation. It navigated the U.S. House with a razor-thin 218 to 214 votes. So its passage was dramatic in itself.
It's close.
Yeah. We're going beyond just the headlines to reveal its actual components, understand who stands to gain and who faces significant challenges, and maybe most importantly, dissect why it has ignited such intense, often really heated debate across the nation. This isn't just about what you might have heard. It's about understanding the real-world implications, how it touches your community, and the deeper philosophies at play. We'll try to navigate this legislative landscape by first outlining its core components, then charting its impact on different segments of society, next dissecting the heated political battle it ignited, and finally placing it within a larger historical and economic context.
That sounds like a really good framework, a powerful way to frame our mission today. And as we embark on this deep dive, it's crucial to acknowledge that this legislation, particularly its very evocative name, it immediately signals a polarized debate, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It sets the stage right away.
We'll look at everything from, sweeping tax relief to significant health care cuts, from increased military spending to some pretty dramatic shifts in energy policy. So yeah, let's unpack this together. Let's start at the beginning then. The bill's genesis and its core components. This comprehensive package, quickly nicknamed the One Big Beautiful Bill. It made its way through the U.S. House on July 3rd, 2025. With that, as you said, nail-biting 218-214 vote. The very next day, July 4th, 2025, it was signed into law.
Given that narrow margin and the symbolic signing date, what does that tell us about the political climate around its passage?
Well, it speaks volumes, really. It points to a deep ideological chasm within Congress and, frankly, the nation. A 218-214 vote is about as close as you can get.
Right.
It suggests a deeply divided electorate and maybe a willingness to push through pretty comprehensive reform with minimal bipartisan consensus. And this sprawling legislation, it touches on so many diverse aspects of American life.
It reflects a multifaceted approach to reshaping the economic and social landscape. It's like a collection of policies all woven together, which makes its narrow passage even more significant because it wasn't, a piecemeal approach. It was aiming for a wholesale transformation.
Right, a big package deal.
Yeah.
So let's pull back the curtain on its contents.
Yeah.
What exactly are the primary pillars of this bill?
Okay, well, we can start with the tax provisions. That's a big one. This bill features an extension of an astounding $4.5 trillion in tax relief from a previous administration.
$4.5 trillion?
Yeah,
Wow.
and it makes most of those cuts permanent. This largely embodies a particular economic philosophy, often termed supply-side economics, which basically posits that lower taxes for corporations and high-income earners stimulate investment, encourage economic growth, and ultimately create jobs. The key insight here, I think, is the long-standing debate. Does this trickle-down effect truly benefit all segments of society? Or does it primarily, exacerbate wealth concentration? With the bill often coming due later in, say, increased national debt or potential cuts to public services.
That's the critical framing to keep in mind. And aligning directly with what's been termed an America First policy, prioritizing domestic industry, robust national defense, there's also a significant boost in military spending.
That's right.
How does this particular allocation compare to, say, historical defense budgets? And what specific strategic aims are supporters citing to justify such an increase beyond just general America First ideas?
Well, this isn't just an incremental increase. It really signifies a robust expansion in defense procurement, which would translate into significant contracts for major defense sector players, the big companies.
Right.
And it reinforces that sort of intertwined relationship between military strategy and industrial capacity, what people often call the military-industrial complex. Supporters would argue it's crucial for maintaining a global strategic advantage, enhancing readiness, deterring adversaries in what's, an increasingly complex geopolitical landscape.
Okay. And crucially, on the spending side, the bill allocates controversial funding for a mass migrant deportation drive.
Yes, that's in there. And that direct allocation for one initiative, it starkly contrasts with the other side of the ledger,
Which
which
is,
is where the bill includes very substantial cuts to social programs. We're seeing the federal food assistance program being significantly shrunk.
okay,
And critically, Medicaid is facing its largest cut since the 1960s. This could potentially affect a staggering 17 million recipients.
17 million.
Yeah.
That's huge.
It is. And these deep cuts to Medicaid, they reflect a significant ideological shift in how healthcare is viewed maybe more from a social right towards a more market-driven commodity. The underlying insight, I think, is how this move fundamentally alters the social contract.
How so?
Well, it potentially shifts the burden of care onto individuals and local communities, and it reshapes the very infrastructure of the nation's health safety net, especially in vulnerable areas.
And if we connect this to the broader fiscal picture, despite all the talk of economic boosts from tax cuts, this bill is expected to add a staggering $3.4 trillion to the national deficit over just the next decade. That's a truly colossal sum. It raises serious questions about, well, long-term fiscal sustainability.
Indeed. The Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, they estimate that this fiscal trajectory could severely strain future federal budgets. That could potentially lead to cuts in other critical areas or even higher interest rates for you, the average American, as the government computes for borrowing money. Yeah. And what's also particularly insightful here is the distinct direction taken on energy policy. The bill explicitly ends subsidies for clean energy and electric vehicles.
Ends them.
Ends them. This marks a clear philosophical divergence. It effectively deprioritizes crucial climate transition efforts and potentially locks in carbon-intensive infrastructure for longer.
Okay, so we've looked at what the bill contains. Let's now turn our attention to the destination it creates for different groups. Who truly benefits and who might face the steepest challenges? Like any major sweeping piece of legislation, this bill creates its own set of distinct winners and losers, right?
Absolutely. On the winning side, wealthy individuals and corporations stand to benefit most directly and significantly from those extended tax cuts. Lower taxes effectively translate into a disproportionate fiscal advantage for them, potentially widening existing wealth disparities.
Okay.
Also, the increased military spending means more contracts, more jobs in the defense sector, reinforcing that defense industrial capacity we mentioned.
Right, the cha-ching factor.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. And for many who supported the previous administration, this bill directly fulfills key campaign promises, particularly on tax cuts and immigration. So for them, it's a significant political victory.
Okay, but the picture shifts dramatically when we look at the other side of this legislative coin. How are low-income families, in particular, projected to be impacted by these changes?
Well, they are expected to be hit particularly hard, especially by the cuts to federal food assistance and Medicaid. Imagine the profound impact on millions when healthcare coverage is suddenly curtailed or even removed entirely.
Yeah.
It forces agonizing choices about basic necessities. And the mechanisms through which these cuts might cascade into broader economic instability for these communities are pretty significant.
And what about rural areas?
Right, rural communities could face particularly significant challenges, too. The potential closure of rural hospitals due to these Medicaid cuts that could leave vast swaths of the population in a really precarious position.
Like a healthcare desert forming?
Potentially, yeah. Struggling to maintain access to essential healthcare services, it's like telling rural America, good luck, you're kind of on your own. And of course, environmentalists are understandably and deeply disappointed by the end of clean energy subsidies,
Right.
which could significantly slow down the transition to renewable energy. This decision deprioritizes those crucial climate transition efforts, impacting global efforts to combat climate change. Mother Nature might not be too happy.
So the passage of this bill was far from quiet. It sparked a dramatic and very public battle right there in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a simple vote. It felt like a full-blown political showdown.
Yeah, a key aspect to consider here is the sharp contrast in reactions from key
Right.
political figures. You heard it. We heard the previous president hailing it as the biggest bill of its kind ever signed, promising it will supercharge the U.S. economy into a rocket ship.
Right, the rocket ship analogy.
Exactly. Especially emphasizing its signing on July 4th, it was presented as this big economic triumph, a bold stroke for prosperity.
But the opposition was fierce, wasn't it?
Hmm.
Unrelenting, very vocal. Former President Joe Biden called it not only reckless, it's cruel.
Mm-hmm.
And House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries spoke against it for, what, nearly 9 hours straight on the House floor?
That's right, a marathon session.
Labeling it this one big, ugly bill and a disgusting abomination. Can you maybe unpack the specific aspects of the bill that evoke such profoundly divergent, such emotionally charged reactions?
Absolutely. The stark divergence really stems from fundamental disagreements about, well, fiscal responsibility, social welfare, and the role of government itself. Supporters emphasize the tax cuts as a growth engine, right?
Yeah.
While opponents highlight the social program cuts as a moral failure and the deficit increase as fiscally irresponsible. Jeffrey's marathon speech really underscored the humanitarian concerns, focusing on the Medicaid cuts and the deportation funding, framing them as an attack on vulnerable populations.
Okay.
While Biden's reckless and cruel label likely targeted both the fiscal implications and what was perceived as a lack of compassion in those cuts.
And even within the Republican Party itself, there were noticeable concerns, some rumblings. What were the strategic calculations or maybe ideological tensions at play for those within the party who expressed reservations?
Yeah, that's particularly insightful looking inside the party. Some did worry openly about the ballooning national debt the bill is projected to create.
Which clashes with some traditional conservative ideas.
Exactly, traditional conservative fiscal principles. Others feared that the cuts to health and welfare programs could hurt their chances in future elections, especially for, more moderate Republicans in swing districts,
Right.
where these social impacts would be felt very keenly.
The political calculation.
Right. It was a clear balancing act between satisfying the party's base and protecting vulnerable incumbents.
Let's dig a bit deeper now into the economic and social implications. The fallout, maybe. That expected $3.4 trillion addition to the national deficit over the next decade. That certainly raised more than a few eyebrows among economists and fiscal watchdogs.
Yeah, it definitely has. And it raises this important question. Will these tax cuts truly spur robust economic growth?
Yeah.
Or will they ultimately lead to increased inequality and, down the line, potentially future tax hikes on everyone to cover the growing debt?
The bill coming due.
Exactly. It's almost like making a significant investment on credit. You anticipate the return, but you absolutely cannot forget the bill for that capital is indeed coming due. The CBO estimates this fiscal trajectory could severely strain future budgets, potentially leading to cuts elsewhere or even higher interest rates for you, the average American.
Right, impacting borrowing costs.
Yeah, as the government competes for borrowing money.
Okay, and the social impact. It seems undeniably significant, deeply personal for many. With 17 million people potentially losing Medicaid, scores of rural hospitals at risk.
Mm-hmm.
For many low-income families, this could mean, well, making an agonizing choice between paying rent and seeing a doctor when they're sick.
It could, yes.
What are the policy's underlying assumptions about social safety nets here? And how does this shift the burden of care?
Well, the bill seems to reflect an underlying assumption that social safety nets can or maybe should be significantly pared back, relying more on, say, individual responsibility or maybe private sector solutions.
Okay.
This fundamentally shifts the burden of care. And these aren't just numbers on a page. These are lives being affected, potentially pushing millions into deeper poverty or health crises. And the cuts to food assistance could leave millions more hungry, especially during tough economic times.
And environmentally, ending those clean energy subsidies seems to send a very clear signal. What are the long-term policy implications of those energy decisions?
Well, this legislative move could significantly slow down the transition to renewables. That impacts global efforts to combat climate change. It essentially deprioritizes future environmental sustainability in favor of immediate economic considerations based on traditional energy sources.
So potentially locking in older tech.
Could be, and this could lead to a reliance on more volatile energy markets and potentially increase energy costs for consumers, for you, in the long run.
Okay, to really understand the profound implications of this bill, it's incredibly helpful to connect it to the past, right? This isn't the first time we've seen major tax cuts enacted. We could look back to, 2017?
That's right, 2017 is a key comparison.
When a previous set of similar cuts primarily benefited higher income earners and businesses. How does this new bill build upon, or maybe diverge from, those historical precedents?
Well, one striking element of this new bill is that it essentially takes those previous 2017 cuts, many of which were set to expire,
Right.
and makes them permanent, while also adding even more in some areas. It's like continuing a specific economic experiment, maybe hoping for a different long-term outcome this time.
Doubling down.
Kind of, yeah. The precedents from 2017 showed that while there was some immediate economic activity, the long-term impact on the national debt was substantial, and wealth concentration continued or even increased. This bill seems to double down on that approach.
And what's particularly insightful, I think, is how public opinion so clearly reflects this deep, almost chasm-like division across the nation.
Mm.
Recent polls suggest a country split right down the middle. Some see this legislation as an absolute boon for the economy, a necessary jolt,
Mm.
while others worry deeply and vocally about the social and fiscal costs that will inevitably follow. What are the underlying values, do you think, that create such a profound split in public perception?
It's truly like that family dinner argument playing out on a national scale, isn't it? Everyone has a strong opinion, and no one seems to be backing down.
Yeah.
This division stems from a clash of fundamental beliefs about the role of government, economic fairness, societal responsibility. On one side, there's a belief in individual liberty, limited government intervention, where lower taxes are seen as almost a right, and the engine of prosperity.
Okay.
On the other side, there's a belief in a more robust social safety net, collective responsibility, where cuts to social programs are viewed as morally reprehensible and increased inequality is seen as a threat to social cohesion.
You can so easily imagine, like a small business owner in Texas saying, lower taxes mean I can finally hire more staff, expand my operations, create jobs.
Right. You hear that argument.
And at the very same time, a single mother in rural Ohio might counter, how am I possibly supposed to feed my kids if food assistance is cut and I lose my health care?
Exactly. Two very different realities potentially created by the same bill.
It's a fundamental clash of priorities, of values that will undoubtedly shape America's future for years to come. So there you have it. That was our deep dive into the One Big Beautiful Bill. We've explored its core components, meticulously broken down who stands to win and who faces challenges, delved into the heated political reactions it provoked, and considered its significant potential long-term impact on our economy, our healthcare system, and the environment.
And whether this monumental legislation proves to be, a masterpiece that truly catapults the nation forward or ultimately reveals itself to be a profound mess that adds to future burdens, well, only time will truly tell. But what's undeniably clear is the profound ripple effect it will have on countless lives and the fundamental direction of the nation. It marks a significant moment in American policy.
And as we conclude this deep dive, it leaves us with an important, maybe lingering question. How do we, as a society, navigate these incredibly complex choices that demand a balance between economic growth, social well-being, and environmental responsibility? What stands out to you as the most critical takeaway from this monumental legislation?